Gotcha.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. As you see, we've had a few technical issues this morning. We appreciate your patience. Welcome to Engaging Your Board and Volunteers and Building Community Support. This is part of our Building Your Program's Financial Resilience webinar series hosted by OVS with JA Strategies and Krieger Solutions. My name is Rachel Gentili. I'm a program outreach specialist in the Training and Outreach Department of OVS, and we're excited to get started. So for today, this slide does say that we have an ASL interpreter. I just want to let you know that unfortunately, that was what we were trying to work on the back end. The ASL interpreter is not on today. However, closed captioning will be available after the recording is uploaded to our YouTube channel. I will also put this in the chat as well, but we do not have ASL today. There will be closed captioning on the recording that is posted within the next day or two on our YouTube channel. If you are having trouble hearing, please make sure that you are accessing audio. The audio information is included on this screen, and we can move forward.
All right, well, thank you, Rachel. So I am Blake Cush. I'm the Director of Training and Outreach at OVS, and welcome to Engaging Your Board and Volunteers and Building Community Support. This past April, we hosted a webinar on financial sustainability for victim assistance programs, where we reviewed the current landscape of VOCA funding and its uncertain future. And we understand that this financial environment comes with many challenges and questions. And building off of that initial discussion we had back in April, we developed the Building Your Program's Fiscal Resilience webinar series with the hopes of helping you tackle some of these unique challenges. And today's webinar is the second in this series, and each webinar is recorded, and links are made available on the OVS VAP Training Center webpage, as well as on the OVS YouTube training channel. As soon as you exit today's webinar, you'll be directed to an evaluation survey on the presentation. This is a safe pop-up that will automatically open in your web browser. Please take a couple minutes and give us your feedback. We use these evaluations to enhance future training opportunities, and we couldn't do that without your input. You'll also have an opportunity there during that evaluation to notify us if you're interested in receiving more training and follow-up on this topic or a variety of other training topics. As today's webinar is led by Jennifer Amstutz of JA Strategies and Alan Krieger of Krieger Solutions. Both Jenny and Alan have more than 40 years of combined experience in consulting and training, working with nonprofits and agencies around the state of New York. Both have also served as executive directors of nonprofit organizations, and both have master's degrees in management. So with that said, we appreciate your patience. I'd like to go ahead and formally welcome Jenny and Alan.
Thank you very much, Blake. We're happy to be here today. So hopefully many of you have been on one of our webinars before. There have been a number of them, but we welcome new people. And for anybody who is new and hasn't been on one of our webinars or one of the WebEx webinars before, we just want to do a quick reminder about some of the features on the screen in front of you. We use the chat feature to take questions, and there are a couple of opportunities today where we're going to ask you to chat in and give us some of your own feedback. So if you haven't used this feature before on WebEx, you can find it at the bottom of your screen. You're going to see, you may need to hover over the bottom of your screen or click on the bottom of the WebEx screen, and you'll see a menu pop up at the bottom. In the center of the icons is the one with the bubble in it that opens the chat box. You can see a yellow arrow on it here. It's black if it hasn't been opened yet. It's blue once you do have it open, and it will open on the right-hand side of your screen. So during the program today, if you have any questions or comments for us, please enter them into the chat box. Be sure your chat box is set to send your message to all panelists. Take a moment, and if you can change that right now, that would be great. We do take turns monitoring your questions, so if you send it to all panelists, we'll make sure that somebody will see it quickly. We do try and answer some questions as we go along, but we have time at the end set aside to do just that. During the webinar, you're also going to be given an opportunity to participate in 3 polls. When we open the poll, the box will pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll be able to click your answer right there. Once the box pops up, we give you about 30 seconds, so we'll give you some time to think about it beforehand and then choose quickly. Today, our workshop goals really is we want you to think about community outreach, because with everything going on right now, community outreach may have taken a backseat. It's harder to do than ever. We're mostly virtual. it's hard to be actively engaged in the community. But community outreach and engagement is always important, and we don't want to ignore it even now that we're in a crisis. So today we're going to look at ways to build community outreach into your day-to-day work. We think it's important to have your outreach plan pulled together, excuse me, all in one place. So we're going to talk about creating a written outreach plan, and we're going to go through the different components that make up that plan. Doing outreach is about making sure the community knows who you are and the important work that you do. So we're going to talk about developing key messages for your organization, messages that will help you tell the story of your program, tell the story of your clients and the successes that you've had. And finally, we're going to talk about engaging your volunteers and your board members. They're well positioned and suited to be impactful messengers and ambassadors for your agency. So as I said before, we're going to do 3 polls today to get a sense of where you are with your community outreach right now. So the first one I want you to the first thing I want you to think about is your community as a whole and how broad-based both your outreach is as well as your support. So when you think about your community and your outreach, would you say that you're reaching your entire community? So are you, do you have broad support throughout the community, or are you reaching a smaller, narrow audience? And sometimes our outreach is done in a scattered way. And so as a result, your support may be scattered throughout the community, but not necessarily broad-based. And the final answer is admitting that you may have limited outreach right now, and your support really is only with the people who work with you on a regular basis. So we're going to open the poll now, and I ask you to kind of quickly try and pick the answer that fits your agency the best. We have about 15 seconds left, so if you have not chosen, now is a good time to do so.
Be sure you hit submit in the lower right corner when you're done.
All right, time is up. So it takes a few minutes for us to publish the poll.
It takes about 20 seconds for it to publish, so bear with me for a moment.
Okay, so only half of us answered, but for most of us, it's pretty well spread throughout. But right now, most of us are either reaching a narrow audience or we have scattered outreach. Only about less than somewhere between 5 and 10% of you have feel like you're reaching a broad-based community, the whole broad-based community. And only a couple of you are doing no outreach right now. So that's great, or very limited outreach. So it's terrific. So one of the things we're going to try and work on today is thinking about how can you be less scattered and more thoughtful in your approach to outreach, and maybe try and build it so you feel like you have more of a broad-based approach to your community outreach program. So we're going to start the webinar by talking about why we need to make time for community outreach engagement, even when we're busy putting out all of the fires that have come up over the last few months and getting the work out and getting the job done. We're all busy, and many of us are not working in our own offices. And there are really fewer and fewer opportunities for traditional community outreach and community engagement the way we thought of them last year. But as much as we want to think that people will get to know us by our reputation and by the good work that we do, strategic and intentional community outreach will help us bring needed attention to what's going on in our own communities. By doing community outreach, it will help you create the message about the important work that you do so that you get recognition for it, and that will help you increase your base of support throughout your area. And with a broad base of support, you'll be able to increase the number of new donors that you have supporting your programs if you have a fundraising program, or increase the number of volunteers that you have helping you do the work. And it'll also help you access new clients and clients from new communities. It's important to make community outreach a priority for the organization or program as a whole. And we're going to talk about an outreach plan in a little while. And that outreach plan is really going to talk about a consolidated outreach for your organization or your program. But community outreach and engagement really should be a priority for everybody on your staff or everybody involved with your organization. By being part of the work that you do, staff members and volunteers have shown that they have a commitment to the mission and to the people that you serve. So everyone can be an ambassador and help you get the word out in the community. Sometimes we just focus on the leaders in the organization as those who should be involved in community partnerships and engagement. But by making it a priority for the full staff, it allows staff members to build new partnerships and connections throughout the community, and it will help you build a broader and more diverse base of support. And it may be that you have a number of people that you work with or on your staff already that have community outreach or networking or partnerships as one of their own annual goals. But I know that many of us have set it aside during the last 9 months. With all the fires that we've had to put out and the changes in the way that we do our work and the other things that we've had to adjust to in our lives in general, outreach has taken a backseat for most organizations, and that's definitely to be understood. There's just been too much else to do. So why are we asking you to look at it now? Because the need for your programs and your services continues to grow, especially in these last few months. And at the same time, funding has become a little uncertain, and for some programs may be shrinking. So you need to be reaching out, building that support and accessing new donors and new champions. The second reason to focus on outreach now is because it just is not as easy to do as it was a year ago. There are fewer networking events, and those events are not in person. It's harder to do casual one-on-one or group outreach. Your community outreach these days needs to be intentional, and it needs to be planned because we're doing it in this new environment, and it's going to take us some work to figure out the best way to reach new audiences. So find some time in your calendar or in your team meetings to begin to do some planning around increasing and improving the way you reach out to the community. In 2017, the Forbes Nonprofit Council interviewed nonprofit experts from across the country, and they created a list of 9 ways that nonprofits could increase their community engagement. As we keep saying, the world has changed quite a bit, so I'm going to share 6 of these that I think are most important and relevant right now. The first is to encourage discussion to forge relationships. This is about creating a community discussion around the issues that are important to you and your program, but are also important to the different people in your community. If you are engaging in regular discussion with people, you're not only sharing your mission with them, but you're also learning where their interests and passions lie. And when we share those 2 things, that we're allowed to make better connections between the work that we do and the things that other people care about. And when you do this, this will help you create stronger relationships in the community. The second thing on the list is to participate in local events. And this means that to the degree possible, you should have someone present anytime the community comes together. Of course, there are fewer of these events right now, but they are still happening, and you just need to look a little bit harder for them. For instance, the Chamber of Commerce here where I am locally is doing virtual networking events. They're using Zoom, and they've been really successful in using breakout rooms to create opportunities for small groups to get to know each other better. Many of you may not have thought about being involved with your chambers before, but they really are great places to find new volunteers, new board members, and people who support you. In addition to networking events, there are a lot of issue-related meetings and discussions happening in our communities right now. So it's a good idea to try and have someone at the table for those discussions. And we've added to the Forbes suggestion. They just said participate in local events. We think that if you can't find the community events to participate in, then you might want to create some yourself. This might mean thinking beyond just violence awareness events or things that are mission related. Those types of community outreach events that you've traditionally done, and think about events that bring together staff from a variety of different organizations, as well as people from your community at large. For instance, you might think about bringing together your local nonprofit service organizations to discuss how they are best reaching people remotely. When you have those discussions with them, they'll hear about the work that you're doing. You can find better ways that you can interact with them. Or you can host a neighborhood meeting to help solve a common community need. And that leads to the next suggestion in the list, to be a partner for your community. You want to make sure you're involved in community partnerships and work groups so that you and your agency or program will be seen as a partner working for the betterment of the entire community. And as I said on the previous slide, you want to make sure that people on your staff, a lot of people on your staff have opportunities to be part of these community partnerships. It's not just 1 or 2 people out in the community. I know that sometimes can be hard based on funding, but to the event possible to give everybody on your staff an opportunity to connect with colleagues. Focus on the leaders on the ground is the next list, and next on the list. And this means that you're making sure you're reaching out to the people who are considered the leaders and the influencers in your community. Once you have their support and with them as your champions, then it will be easier to gain the support of others in the community. Leverage the community for knowledge. Utilize your volunteers and your community partners to help you understand what's going on in your community that you might not know about. They might be able to help you make inroads into new communities or help you spread the word. And finally, let ambassadors lead the way. We're going to spend some time talking about this later in the webinar, but this means you do not have to be the only voice for your organization in the community. As I said previously, it's important for everyone to have a role. So find ways to leverage others as your ambassadors. Those might be other staff members, they should be your board members, and they can include some of your most valued volunteers. The more people you have talking about you in the community, the more quickly the word will get out about the good work you're doing. As we mentioned before, community outreach needs to be an intentional, planned effort. So now Alan is going to talk about creating your outreach plan.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. If you've been to any of our previous webinars, you probably know that Jenny and I both love planning. We've talked a lot about strategic plans and fund development plans, evaluation plans, and now we're going to talk about outreach plans. An outreach plan provides you with a roadmap for how you're going to build community support. The first step is creating your outreach plan is to determine your outreach goals. What are you trying to achieve by reaching out to the community? Maybe you want to increase donors. Maybe you're looking to bring attention to your programs or to an issue. Depending on what your goals are, you may answer the remaining questions very differently. Goals are often broad and somewhat visionary, so we need to drill down a bit and create some measurable objectives. The next two questions will help you create more measurable objectives. Who exactly do you want to reach, and where will you find these people? Once you've determined that, then you need to develop your action strategy, how to best connect with those people, and what your message will be. And the final part of the plan, identifying who will carry it out and what the timeline will be, so you can keep your team on track and accountable. Let's talk first about outreach goals. Your goals should be designed to address your critical needs and therefore will be unique to your organization or program. They may change over time based on changes in your world. Your outreach goals this year, for instance, might be quite different than they were last year. In general, goals are broad statements of change that are not necessarily specific enough to be measurable. They can include things like increasing community recognition, building community focus for your mission, or expanding your reach into new communities or new demographics. The next part of the plan focuses on specifying your outreach objectives. Like all of the plans we discussed, these objectives should be specific and measurable. We use the acronym SMART to capture this: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. You want your objectives to be specific and measurable because, as the saying at the top of the slide says, what you measure is more likely to get done. SMART objectives also provide the foundation and focus of your outreach plan. Being specific means spelling out exactly who you want to reach and maybe what you hope they'll do as a result. It's best to specify this in a measurable way, even if you're not sure of exactly what you might accomplish. You can always adjust this as you learn more, but starting with a quantifiable target can help you focus your plan. Along with who you want to reach, how many people do you want to reach? If you're reaching potential donors, what's an initial response you're hoping for from them? For example, you may say, we want to connect with 30 community leaders in Community X who are not currently engaged with our program. We hope to have at least 10 of them make a contribution in the next year. You want to make sure your objective is actionable, something your team can actually carry out. So make sure that you have a specific strategy in mind to reach out to those people. All objectives should be realistic. Think through the resources you have and what it will take to carry out the actions you've identified. And finally, it should be time-bound, so it'll include a timetable. You might want to frame the number of people you want to connect with within a certain specific time period. Let's take a deeper look at who you want to reach. By answering that question, you'll be defining your target audience for the community outreach and the measurable objective that you are setting. For instance, this could include specific communities by geographic areas or other specific traits. It can include key leaders or influencers in your community who are not yet aware of your programs or the people you serve. Often the focus is on people who are likely to be interested in your mission and programs and likely to help your efforts. Some plans will have target audiences that are much more specific. For example, key leaders and influencers in the legal community or women corporate executives. Take time with your team to think this through. You can't reach all people at once, so focus on smaller groups will help you sharpen your plan and your message. Once you've identified the target audience you want to reach, then you need to think about where you're going to find these people. In what we've labeled here as normal times, you might go to targeted events like community networking and partnership meetings, or chamber networking events, as Jenny mentioned. Often organizations will ask board members or other supporters to host what are called friend raiser events, where they invite people who are part of the target audience to a small gathering where they can get to know you and you can talk with them about what you do. Other good opportunities in normal times include seeking out speaking engagements at Rotary Club meetings or other events where your target audience might gather in order to educate a large number of people at the same time. And finally, community outreach can be one-on-one, reaching out to a select number of people who might be key to gaining support and setting up individual meetings with them to discuss what you do and why it is important. Many, if not all, of these strategies are much more difficult right now. That doesn't mean, though, that there are no ways to successfully reach out to the community. So where can you find your target audience now during the pandemic? Just because organizations aren't holding in-person networking meetings doesn't mean that networking meetings are not happening. As Jenny described, there are many chambers and other organizations that hold virtual trainings or virtual meetings, so you can still seek people out that way. And we also need to do our community outreach in a less personal way. Instead of sharing your story with one or two people when you're networking, you can share the same story by using blogs and email blasts and creating other opportunities for community outreach on social media. These can be further shared by your supporters, your staff, and your board members, potentially reaching a much wider audience. There's also been an increase in the number of virtual trainings and conferences online, so you can still seek out speaking engagements. And because people are joining these trainings and conferences virtually, you may actually reach more people than you would have with an in-person event. As you make contacts at these virtual events, you'll want to follow up individually or in small groups. While you're unlikely to have in-person one-on-one meetings with potential friends and supporters, it doesn't mean you can't do them at all. Use Zoom or the telephone to set up individual follow-up meetings. Now we'd like to get a sense of your current community outreach and how that compares to previous years. In a minute, we're going to open a poll and give you 30 seconds again to choose one answer. Are you doing more than ever, about the same, less than usual, or not doing any outreach right now? So here comes the poll. Again, it'll pop up on your screen and you'll have 30 seconds to select your answer and be sure to hit submit in the lower right-hand corner. There it is. You have 30 seconds, choose your answer and hit submit. The 10 seconds left. Okay, time is up, so we're going to have our computer compile the results and they'll be up on your screen in just another minute or so. Okay, so here are the results, and about a third of you didn't answer, but 2/3 did, and most of you said you're doing less than usual. A few are doing even more, about almost 20% are doing even more. That's great. And the number doing about the same, and very few are doing no outreach, which is great. So less than usual is understandable given some of the stresses and strains we're under. Caseloads are up. People don't have the ability to move around as well and it makes it much harder, but congratulations to the 20% of you that are doing more. That's really wonderful to see. Okay, for those of you that do have an active outreach program, you're keeping it up or doing more, we'd like to have you chat into the chat box some examples of things your program is doing to reach out to the community and to new audiences this year. We'll read out some of them as you chat them in, and then we'll also try to collect these and send out a list to you after the program. So if you haven't, Jenny showed you in the beginning where the chat box is. It's that circle with a bubble in it. If you could click that, your chat should open. If you chat to all presenters, we'll see what you've got. And again, we've got a lot of people on the call. We're really looking to not just hear from Jenny and I, but to share the wisdom of the group. So if you have programs you're doing, please go ahead and chat them in.
Make sure you're definitely not sending them just to the host, because then it only goes to one person. We did get a couple that said passing out PPE, Facebook Live KYR trainings.
If somebody has hosting vigils, doing trainings, attending virtual meetings nationwide.
And remember, all panelists, virtual events at senior centers.
Okay, so someone has did 2 online fundraising events and gained a few new donors to our list of donors. That's great. Yeah, we may want to have smaller expectations this time around, but you want to keep moving forward. Okay, somebody else that's selling PPE to fundraise, Instagram lives. Not sure what Instagram Live maybe, but
Yep.
making
It's
more
like
use
doing
of
a live event
Instagram.
on Instagram.
Food drive distributions, so participating in others' events or having your own. Virtual events, speaking to demographic groups such as Latina businesswomen, speaking to Rotary groups, publishing articles in WWBA and local media, e-blasts, and tripling our Instagram and Facebook posts. Okay, so increasing social media when you can't get out in person. More food distribution, connect with folks in need, sharing services, community forums to increase collaboration with other organizations. Okay, so some good ideas. If you want to keep chatting them in, we will try to collect that at the end, but we're going to move on here. Jenny's going to talk about how you develop your key messages, which is an important part of your outreach program.
All right, thanks, Alan. I want to make sure I'm unmuted. I think I am. So once you've established who your target audience is and how you plan to reach them, you do want to clarify what it is that you want to tell them. So we're going to turn to key messages. We touched on key messages last month during our fund development webinar, so this slide may look familiar to those of you who are in that webinar as well. But the concept is the same. During the creation of your outreach plan, you want to develop 2 or 3 key messages that you want to get out into the community. Those messages will have to do with your mission and why you do what you do. They may have to do with the people that you serve or the impact and successes of your programs. But ultimately, your key messages are the things that you want people to remember about your organization. If they're learning about you for the first time, what is it that they're going to walk away with? What are they going to remember about your organization? In addition to what they will know about your programs, you want them also to learn how they can help you with this work. And you can use time with staff, even if you have staff who can't go out into the community, working with staff at staff meetings, interviewing your volunteers, talking to them about what they think the stories are. What are the key messages that people within the organization think are important? Using time during staff meetings, or even having people use suggestion boxes. There are a lot of different ways that you can collect those stories and collect why you think it's why people think it's impactful, and then use those to develop what the 2 or 3 most important are. But once you have developed those key messages and you have them in place, then you can tailor those messages to your target audience, because what resonates with one group may not resonate in the same way with another group. In order for your outreach plan to be something that you can and will be put into action, you do need to be clear about who you'll use to deliver your message. And I've already talked about this a couple of times before, but community outreach is a good way for you to engage people throughout the organization. Your key staff as well as your board members and your volunteers. And so if you look at this slide, you can see we have program directors and key staff up on the left. Often that's who we think about as the voices of our organization. We want you to think about moving over there to the right because in order to and include your board members and volunteers a little bit more. Because in order for the outreach to be broad-based, you want to think about having a team of people who will be implementing the outreach plan. And this full team that includes all of these people will be make up your key messengers. So when considering who to add to this team, you want to think about the people who are most committed to the work that you do, people who are knowledgeable about your programs and understand the impact that they have, not just on your clients, but also on the community at large. And finally, you want to think about having a diverse group of messengers so that they will be able to connect with the different target audiences that you have included in your outreach plan. So, think about the people who will, from all of these groups, who will connect best with your target audiences. You may have a board member who's active with local businesses and corporations, and you may want to target them because that's a target audience for you. Or you may have a key messenger who is well connected in the Latino community, or you may want to have a volunteer who's active with youth activists. If these are, these may be some of your target audiences, so you want to pick your key messages from people who may have connections in those areas. We're going to talk about engaging these volunteers and board members to be your key messages in a little while, but it's important to really include in the plan who they are so that it is actionable, so that you know who will deliver your messages. The final step in your outreach plan is to make sure that you have a timeline. This gives you an opportunity to spread the outreach throughout the year and to make sure that you are fully active, not just during the times where community outreach is expected, during Domestic Violence Awareness Month or other times of the year where people expect to hear from your agency. But it's a planned effort that people are hearing about you constantly, or at least with regularity. And by including the timeline in your outreach plan, it will help keep you focused. It'll help you know if you're meeting your objectives in a timely way, and it will give you something to measure your progress against. As we mentioned earlier, an outreach plan should be a written document that includes all the components we've mentioned. But it doesn't have to be a long or complicated document. It should include your goals and your key messages at the beginning, but the rest of it, your measurable objectives, including your target audiences, those can all be in a table or a spreadsheet or simply listed out. But you want to make sure that whatever format you use will clearly spell out who will do what and by when. What are the steps that are involved in order to reach your target audiences? Do you need to recruit new people to help you carry it out? You want to think about how you're going to monitor or track the plan and what you'll do if things are not going according to the timetable you set. Those are going to be the contingencies that you have. Remember that as important as community outreach is, you want to create a plan that's realistic, and you may need to adapt and change the plan as the year progresses. If we've learned nothing else this year, it's that the world can change pretty quickly, so we need to be adaptable. But we don't want to let something go entirely. We just need to adapt it and change it. Maybe change our timeline or change the way we change our methods of getting to our audiences our target audiences that we set. We're going to spend the rest of the webinar talking about how you can engage your board and your volunteers as ambassadors and key messages for your program out in the community. And we're going to start the discussion by launching our final poll. We'd like to know in your organizations right now who is actively and strategically representing you out in the community. And this is an opportunity to check all that apply. Is it your executive director or the director of your program? Do you have program staff that are out in the community doing outreach? Are you already using your board members? And have you found a way to engage your volunteers to help you tell your story? We want to know that. And if there are other people that you are using as messengers or as ambassadors, maybe former clients or parents or someone we haven't mentioned, please check that other box. And then type into the chat who you're using, because I think that will be educational for the rest of the group to get a sense of some of the other people you might use as your messengers. So we're going to launch the poll now. You have another 30 seconds. And please remember, check all that apply. 15 seconds left. Okay, the poll is closed. We have 20 seconds to make our guesses about how it's going to come out. All right. So it's great. So looks like, a lot of people, 36% of the group is already using your executive director, or 36% of the people who answered. Almost half of you are using program staff, and about 17% are using board members, and 16% are using volunteers. So that's great. So some of you really have already thought about using your volunteers and your board members. And I think that that's a great opportunity. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about how to engage them. So 17% of you who answered responded that you're already using your board members as messengers, and that's great. It is slightly less than what's seen across the country. In 2017, an index of nonprofit board practices was released by BoardSource, and BoardSource is the leading organization serving nonprofit boards across the country. And if you haven't used them before, they're a really great resource for board information. But they found that only 52% of organizations reported actively using board members in community advocacy. And that means that half of the organizations out there are really missing a great opportunity. And I know some of you don't have board members because you may be part of a government agency. But if you do have them, board members really should be, you should consider incorporating them into your outreach plan because they're already should be among your greatest advocates. They're dedicating their time, and they're hopefully dedicating or contributing their treasure or their money to the organization. So they're well positioned to share why they do that with the community and share the information about you with their own networks. And if you have a diverse board, then you'll be able to reach a more diverse audience. Secondly, in order to be a good messenger, you need first to be really knowledgeable about the work and impact of the programs. So by engaging your board members as messengers, you're creating a really great opportunity to get them a little more directly engaged in what you do and its impact. Because they'll need to learn more in order to communicate your message and be ready to deliver that to the community at large.
Jenny, we had a couple people chat in some additional things they do.
Oh, great. I didn't even see that.
Reaching out, they use participants, clients, youth members, peer mentors, prior clients, and students doing internships. One person said they have an advisory board. So again, lots of potential places to find messengers.
Right. And, and what I've just said about board members, I think counts for a lot of these audiences as well. They already have, they're already engaged in your organization. They know the good work that you do. So if they're prior clients, if they're students, your advisory board, they're all committed to your mission. And so they can be great ambassadors out in the community. And so especially for those of you who don't have board members, using some of these other people, your advisory board, maybe some of the police that you might be working with, other partners, is a good way to find people, get them engaged, and then educate them a little bit more so they can be key messengers for you out there in the community. Thanks, Alan, for pointing that out. I did not see it. So, and so I'll use that to transition into the next part because volunteer ambassadors are effective to be messengers for you out in the community. As I said, they've demonstrated their commitment to the mission. So you're, especially if you have students who are in their internships or peer mentors, they're volunteering their time. If they're volunteering their time on a hotline or with one of your other direct service programs, they'll have some firsthand knowledge of the impact of what you do for your clients and for the community. So they bring a whole different aspect of a different way of telling your story to the community. And volunteers give you another opportunity to broaden the network of people you can reach. They may come from different communities than your board members and staff, or maybe even from a different age, ethnic, or geographic demographics. So it gives you that breadth that you're looking for when you want to reach the community at large. So you should be looking out for these volunteers that you think might show that spark. You do want your key messengers to have enthusiasm and have spark. So look for those volunteers that do have that spark and enthusiasm for what you do, and see if they would be willing to speak for you or connect others to you out there in the community. So what are the best ways to activate your board members and volunteers to be part of your key messenger team? The first thing you want to do is be intentional about how you use them to reach your target audience. You want to match the right messenger with the right event and the right target audience. So talk to your potential messengers and find out what their interest is and who's in their network. Do they even know people in your target group? And if they do, what can those people offer? And then, and find out a little bit more about what is the best way to connect with those people. And then set reasonable and measurable targets with your volunteers and board members. Maybe it's only one speaking engagement, or maybe you want somebody who can set up an appointment with one or two of the key leaders on the ground that you thought were important. And then you work with them to create a plan in a collaborative way. We want to be thoughtful about which key messages to use with which target audience. We want to make sure that our messengers have the knowledge and the practice delivering those key messages. So it's worthwhile to spend some time working with your board members or volunteers to help them craft a message and develop their elevator pitch. And Alan's going to work through that with the group in a minute. An elevator pitch and practicing it will give them the confidence they need to represent the program well. Some organizations have been successful using a board assessment to help board members and volunteers maximize their role as ambassadors for the organization or program they're involved in. So we think this is another good way to engage both your board members and your volunteers and increase the outreach they're doing. It's also a good way to collect information about their networks and their connections. The assessment questions should include whether or not they've listed their involvement with your program or organization on their resume, or on their LinkedIn, or if they're using Facebook on their Facebook account. This is going to help you get the broadest visibility for your program. Another question is to understand how often they are speaking about the program or organization with others and sharing their own involvement. And it gives them a time also to reflect on how well they are being an ambassador for your program. And as we had said on the last slide, you want to know who they think is in their network that is likely to be interested in the program and what those specific people can offer. Sometimes, even though we have board members and volunteers that have connections to certain target people and audiences, those volunteers may not be anxious to have conversations with some of them. They're just not comfortable based on their relationship. So it's worth asking who they are willing to have a conversation with. Once you've worked through the answers to these questions, then you can work with them to set specific targets for them to take on. So now I'm going to turn it back to Alan so he can start talking through the elevator pitch.
Okay, we have one other comment come in about parents or even the parents of staff members, family members of your staff. It could be also key message volunteers. So lots of creative ideas out there. So do a quick time check. We're probably going to run a little bit past noon, not very far, but maybe 5 minutes. And we'll be taking questions at that point. So I hope you can all stay on. If anyone has to leave early, an evaluation will pop up, as Blake mentioned, and please fill it out when you leave the webinar. Okay, so we'll talk about developing your key message, and Jenny mentioned the elevator pitch. And taking time to work with your board members or other kind of natural ambassadors to help them develop their individual elevator pitch can be a very valuable exercise for you and for them. If you've never done this yourself, it's worth spending a half hour working it through. In this exercise, everyone should have an opportunity to write their elevator pitch and then an opportunity to practice it with a partner or in a small group. It helps to hear what others write and to adapt your context, adapt their message to your own context. Having already established your goals, objectives, and key messages sets the stage for the elevator speech. These should be short, focused, and engaging description of your program or organization. Short enough that it can be delivered during an elevator ride, or about 1 to 2 minutes long. It should start with some sort of a hook that grabs the listener's attention and keeps them listening. Something that's going to bring the mission and the program to life. For example, a youth service program speech could begin with, "Our youth are being robbed of a whole year of their life." That certainly gets your attention. The body of the elevator pitch, or the middle 30 to 60 seconds, is where you include one key message about the program or organization. For example, we need to provide creative programs to get children in our community engaged with their peers in safe and constructive ways. We've created a program that engages them in physical activities and adds in key educational components. We have 20 fourth graders running relay races where they have to do a short math problem before they could virtually pass the baton, all while keeping them safe and socially distant. Your elevator speech doesn't have to tell the whole story, just pique their interest. The above example was about 40 seconds. Sometimes when we're describing our programs or something we're passionate about, we're tempted to include as many things as we can think of, but providing too many points or messages makes the pitch less focused, and less focused is less memorable. So instead, choose one key message that either is the most meaningful to the messenger themselves or is most likely to be memorable to the person that they're speaking with. When delivering the message, using a story as an example will help personalize the message and the impact of the program. I have an example of that coming up in just a minute. The final part of the pitch is the wrap-up, and that should be where you suggest a next step. Maybe it's getting them on a mailing list or inviting them to an event. The wrap-up is really an opportunity to continue the conversation at another level. For example, you could say, I think you'd be very impressed with what the staff are doing. Would you have time to stop by sometime and see for yourself? I'd be happy to be your socially distant guide. Or, it's a really great program. I'm wondering if you'd be interested in making a small donation to help provide supplies and refreshments. So putting it all together in a slightly different way could sound something like this. It's a difficult challenge for our youth to continue developing in healthy ways during the pandemic. We have a number of great programs that do just that, including KidSpace, which is part of our shelter program. Kathy, a 10-year-old who's living in a different homeless shelter, shared with me how excited she was to hang out with other kids, eat pizza, and play games that are fun, while also helping her with her schoolwork. Her mother has told us how much happier Kathy has become. It's all due to our great staff. Would you like to stop by sometime and see what they do? That was about less than a minute, and it says quite a bit. We want to stay focused and tight. So here are some key reminders when crafting your elevator speech. Next slide. Thanks. Make it something you feel excited to talk about. Show your passion. Explain why you're involved and what value you see in the program. Don't assume your listener knows anything about the program, but don't make this an opportunity to tell them everything about it. 1 to 2 minutes to pique their interest. The story engages people and sticks with them. Something personal or specific is best. You can add 1 or 2 more highlights, but keep it short and focused. Think about who is delivering the message and who is receiving it. Try to tailor the message to the person or people you'll be talking with. And think creatively. Messages can be delivered effectively in so many ways. Next slide. A messenger may be less about providing the message in person. All of your board members and volunteers can share your messages through their own social media and electronic community outreach. You can provide blog posts, email newsletters, and video testimonials, and then encourage them to share it with their networks. And even better, you can ask your key board members and volunteers to share their own story about your program through blog posts and video testimonials. This gives you an opportunity to have a different voice showcased and gives them an opportunity to reach a broad audience with why they've become involved with you and your program. They can talk about what the program means to them and the impact they've seen it have on clients and the community. They can record a short video testimonial or write a short blog post that they can share via email and social media. It can be featured on Facebook pages and websites. And with their permission, you can share it on your social media as well. You might offer to give them some ideas to write about to help them get started, or interview and record them to create the video. It doesn't have to be long, elaborate, or polished. Messages from the heart create a strong impact. For other volunteers who may not be part of your team of key messengers, there are many ways you can involve them as ambassadors in your community. You want to be sure that no matter in what capacity someone's volunteering, they know the mission and are familiar with your services and the key messages, so they truly understand the impact of the entire program or organization. Share success stories with them and encourage them to spread the word day to day. Ask your volunteers to like you on Facebook or Instagram, and then post pictures or share your organizational posts. You could also share specific targets for volunteers and then have a contest. Who can get the most likes on a specific post, for instance? Give prizes. Supply giveaways with your program name on it. You're looking for visibility in the community, then having a cadre of volunteers wearing a t-shirt and answering questions about what the t-shirt represents can be a great way to spread the word. And people like to be recognized for the work they do for your organization. So reward outreach efforts with public recognition and appreciation. We'd like to give you an opportunity to share with us on 2 questions. First, we'd like to hear which of the ideas you've heard today are you going to take back to your agency and think about implementing? So again, if you could put in the chat box some things that you found most helpful and most useful that you think you can do, that would be great. Be sure to chat to all presenters, set to all presenters when you do that. And while you're doing that, we're going to go on to the second question because time is tight. And are there other ideas that we haven't presented that you think could be helpful to your peers here? And if you could share those. So feel free to share what you heard from us and you're taking back, and anything else that you do at your agency that might be helpful to share with other people here. I'll try to read these as they come in. Somebody talked about volunteer and board assessment was something they found helpful. Other ideas are a monthly volunteer call or check-in. Again, in this remote time to stay engaged with people is a great suggestion. And while we're waiting for these to come in, one more thing, if you have any questions for us, this would be a good time to chat them in. We've got a little wrap up we're going to do, and then we'll be answering questions after that. Somebody wrote, I love the ambassador program idea and connecting closer with our board members. We connect a lot with our college campuses and using student groups and organizations to spread awareness. The outreach information was very helpful and provided a guide to help us be more effective. I think it's very valuable that all board members have an elevator pitch for our agency and have practiced it. Also, I like the idea of engaging volunteers and have a way to reward them for being ambassadors. Elevator pitch is a great idea. Okay, I'm going to go on to wrap up, but again, keep chatting in those things and any questions you have, and we'll get back to it. We're just about done. As we close out the webinar, I just want to remind you about the Training and Technical Assistance Request Program that's sponsored by OVS. And through this program, we're able to provide training, coaching, and consulting to OVS-funded programs at no cost to your program or agency. You can find out more about it on the website listed here, but we want to share with you a few sample projects that would relate directly to this community outreach program that we just did. So some of these could be working with leaders in your agency to help develop an outreach plan and walk you through each of the steps to help you build a realistic and actionable plan. We can facilitate a group meeting with your staff or board to help you develop the key messages that you want to use in the outreach program. And we could also provide training to your board members or key messengers around creating and developing an elevator pitch. Just seeing what else we got here. I'll share information with, this is what people chatted in. I'll share information with the team and explore how we can increase awareness in the community. I'll definitely work on our elevator pitch and refining it. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Blake in a minute to wrap up the webinar. Jenny and I are going to stay on, as I said, and answer any questions, so please chat them in. And feel free to email us. There's our email addresses on there. If you have questions, we've covered a lot, and sometimes it's hard to assimilate it. Questions might pop up tomorrow or the day after. Feel free to email us anytime with any questions. And also feel free to email us if you want to find out more about the services we offer. You don't have to come prepared with a fully complete proposal. If you just have some ideas of where you might like some help or what can be helpful, call one of us or email us and set up a phone call to talk it through with you. Okay, so again, I'm going to turn it over to Blake to kind of wrap up, and then we'll be back to answer any questions. So please be typing them in.
Yeah, please.
Your sound's not on, Blake.
Oh, Blake, I think. Oh, we just lost Blake. So I think he was going to tell you to make sure that you make sure that you do fill out the evaluation, and that and maybe about the next webinar that's coming up in December.
Yes, so as you click out, it will automatically redirect you to our survey. It might give you a note that says, are you joining this? Definitely go there. It's a safe, secure link. And yes, please join us next month for the next in our series. Visit ovs.my.gov/training. You can find all of the upcoming events there.
And we are gonna try and to type up and send out all of the suggestions that we had here, because I think there were some really great suggestions on engaging in different communities and using different outreach ways, different things to outreach into the community. So we'll try and get those out to everybody who participated, or put them on the website. I'm not sure which, but one of them you will have access to them.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Hey, I'm back.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and
Yeah.
we hope to see you at our next event.
So again, we'll be happy to stay on a few more minutes if anybody wants to chat in any questions. But we are past noon, and understand if you need to jump off now, please do the evaluation when you do.
Yeah, give us a day or so to get the video up on YouTube as well. But appreciate it, everyone. Thank you for your time today.
And so far, there are no questions, which means we did either such an amazing job with answering every question you have, or we filled your brain with so many things you're still processing. But again, we'll stick around another minute or two, see if any questions pop up. If not, we'll wrap. Okay, so we're getting a couple of thank yous, no questions. That's great. We're happy that you're happy.
Yeah, well, join us next month. December 1st is our next webinar. It's all that information's online, and we'll see you guys then. Thank you, Jenny. Now, thank you guys.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Thank you.